customers, it's customers and what they sort of demand, right? So I think you as a customer being sensitive, careful with what you buy, how you act, I think that makes a pretty large difference, right? In a very, very direct way. And then you as a young person expressing your need to have a carbon neutral product or a low climate impact service will also give companies like warning that they would have to start investing today, because as you grow, you're going to demand more and more of that, right? So that they would have to like sort of invest today in developing products that are not fossil fuel dominant or plastics or whatever. So I think that also like you as a customer makes a pretty big difference. The second thing, of course, like you've seen what Greta Thunberg can do, right? I think you guys really have an amazing amount of power, organization. When I was 19 years old, we were thinking survival. No, we're not really thinking global issues. Whereas today's 19-year-olds are much more purpose-driven than we were when we were young, right? So I think that makes you guys a very, very powerful force, even in the political side of things, right? So I think that's the second way, right? Organize, get together, form groups. You're all doing it already, right? Do it bigger, faster, more, right? I think you guys can have an outsized influence on political outcomes. And I really believe that political outcomes are the real answer, large scale answer to these sorts of issues. But it's not like I have any, but it's a difficult question, no? But I hope I sort of given at least a couple of ways that you can think about. Okay.
If I may, Mac,
sure.
If I may, Matthew, I was just thinking, spreading the message of this whole climate impact is another huge area that high schoolers can really help us, because as Mac was saying, our generation has definitely messed up, no doubt about it. So even educating the parents on what really is the situation, especially in developing countries, this would be another big way by which high schoolers can really make a positive impact. Because, education, I feel sincerely that you have much more access to information, you have much more access to data. I am being educated by my daughter. She was the one who really pushed me to come into this field while I was focusing more on developing additional businesses. She said, I think we have to focus on environment and see how best we can contribute. So I sincerely believe that spreading the message and educating the generation above you would be a big way by which high schoolers can contribute, Matthew.
Absolutely. Thank you for maybe Mr. Gopi, just for some context, if you want to quickly introduce yourself as well.
Nothing big. I'm working with Mack. I'm also a novice. I'm also learning about this. I just got into this field maybe 6 months into this. Gopi, I've been a serial entrepreneur, tech entrepreneur mostly. I developed 3 companies, sold my last one in 2019. Was looking for something to do with more a social impact. Mac and I have known each other for quite some time. He's been educating me on this. I felt that this is the right time for me to jump in, where due to COVID, he was also not able to travel. So I thought maybe I'll jump in and help him out with this wonderful, noble initiative that he started after his experience working with United Nations. So I feel very privileged to be a part of this group, and that's basically what my quick background is, Matthew.
Mr. Mack. Yep, please go ahead.
Let me see the next one. Okay. How did you, Viola Javati? Okay. How did you get involved? Have you ever applied for a specific program? Okay, I'm a bad example. Like I said, I had no idea of helping the poor or working for the UN. I was in the States. I got a PhD in quantum economics. I was headed to Wall Street. The only reason I got the job was because when I started doing my PhD in the States, I was doing it on European Union integration with the general equilibrium model. But the European Union kept changing their idea so often that my model kept getting messed up. And back then, for doing quantitative models, we had to go to VAX systems. I don't know if you kids know what a VAX system is. We had to do things on mainframes back then, because personal computers only started coming at the end of my PhD in terms of widespread use. So we had to apply for mainframes at night to like process these models, and the European Union general equilibrium model that I was working on was getting more and more complex. I gave up. And I landed on a giant data. I was one of the few economists back then in the States that combined satellite data with economic data, because to pay for my living expenses, I got a job packing software boxes for a remote sensing software, and then learned the remote sensing software and got a job doing research with satellite data and remote sensing software. So I tried to combine the remote sensing satellite data with economic data, and I landed on a huge data set for Ethiopia. I had no idea of Ethiopia. I had no what it is. But because the 84 famine, a lot of people had collected a lot of data post a famine to prevent the next famine. So we had a ton of price data, we had a ton of economic data, we had a ton of satellite data for Ethiopia. And me being a big data guy, it was just a big data set to play with. No? And so I used it to do my polynomial distributed lag modeling, vector autoregressions, all of that stuff. But I used it to say, who basically, can I predict who needs food 12 months before it actually happens, 6 to 12 months before it actually happens. And then the second part of my PhD was, once you figure out who needs food and who doesn't, where do you take the food directly to them, and where do you use markets to lower the prices so people can buy food with the lower amount of money they have, right? So it's called a market integration model. So I did that, but I did it more because it was just a big data set. I could apply it. I got some really cool results. My professor was happy. But then somebody at the UN read it and said, hey, do you want to apply it in the real world? So they called me out of the blue and offered me a job. And I still remember the phone call. The guy calls up and says like, hey, do you want to go to Angola? I was like, who the heck are you? And he's like, I'm Pablo Recalde. And he's like, I was like, what is that supposed to mean to me? He said, I work for the UN World Food Program. And I said, you must be joking. My third chapter was how you guys blew $1 billion in Ethiopia doing the wrong thing. He's like, that's why I'm calling you. So I can't really give you any advice because I just accidentally stumbled on it. But having said that, if from Viola Ciavatti, I presume you're Italian. Okay, the Italians run something called it. Yeah, I used to live in Rome, by the way, for the last 6 years. Loved it.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
I'm on the north, a little bit like in Milan.
Oh, you're from Milan. Okay.
Yeah.
No, we traveled all over Italy. No, it's a beautiful, beautiful country. You're very, very lucky. So I got it. Like I said, I got a call out of the blue. But the Italians run something called a JPO program, Junior Professional Officers Program, right? It's a way to get into the UN, right? So the Italian government actually pays for 3 years, puts you in a UN agency, and then you can get in, right? So that's an open competition. You can apply. There's like literally hundreds of Italians who've joined the UN through the JPO, Junior Professional Officer Program. So that's one way. The other is through United Nations Volunteer in Bonn. A lot of people apply for the UNV program in Bonn. That's the other way. The third way that a lot of people got jobs in the UN is they just went to a difficult country like Sudan or Somalia or whatever by themselves, got a job as an intern at the UN, and then sort of then became normal staff, right? A lot of people just took the difficult way to sort of get in, right? So those are sort of three things I can think of, but like I said, I'm the wrong guy to give you advice because I sort of landed on it by accident. So, okay. Any other questions, Viola?
Totally clear. Thank you. Amazing.
Great. Yeah. Syed, can you shed light on how we can contribute to the cause you work for? I think Syed Gopi talked a little bit about it, no? That you guys can you can educate your parents, you can educate the people around you. You can put pressure on the politicians that you work with by forming groups and expressing your views. I think I touched upon that a little bit earlier, right? But I really, really, really believe that you guys are the answer. And I know that it's an enormous burden placed on all of you, but I also think you as a generation are really up for the challenge, right? So I think you guys can make it happen. Okay, Anna Borisova. How can our generation help the vulnerable by any means? What can we do as students? Okay. Yeah, I think again, it sort of goes back to the same thing, no? Like what Gopi said, like educate your parents on the importance of these issues. And this is what I always say, as an economist, I always tell people like, don't do things because you want to save the environment or you want to help the poor or whatever. No, do things because it makes monetary profit sense for you, right? So like if you have significant income inequality, right, in the US, for example, or India, or Uganda, right? You can say like, yeah, okay, so what? There is lots of income inequality, but if you're a rich person, you can say, okay, I don't really care. Or if I have a nice job or a good education, I don't really care. But there's enough studies that prove that if income inequality gets acute, it leads to a social revolution. It literally leads to destruction of everything, right? So even if you're a well-off person, you could lose everything, right? Your life, your wealth, your houses, because when income inequality gets high, society needs a release valve, and the release valve usually is riots or whatever, right? So even if you don't care for the poor, you should care. If you care for your own wealth, you should invest in reducing income inequality if you want to protect your own wealth, right? And the same with climate change today, with carbon markets being good or European Union putting a high price on carbon, doing the right thing is also profitable, right? So it's different ways of sort of doing, looking at the same problem, right? Not from a noble sort of help lens, but more from a market dollars and cents lens. Okay, Anna, oh, that's a good one. Anna Borisova, what part of your job you find most controversial? Okay, I could tell you, but I have to kill you. Okay. And I mean, like I think I gave a bit of a hint on that, no? That a lot of the times when we work in these difficult places, especially with millions of people, and we have to pick and choose within the millions who gets and who doesn't, I think the geopolitics and the politics in general get very, 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 very difficult, right? In many of the countries we worked, right? So I think for me, was it Winston Churchill that said democracy is the worst form of government unless you compare it to everything else? It does, yeah, the politics does make the job very controversial, very difficult, right? And sometimes we have to do certain inefficient things in order to be able to take that into account, right? I mean, confidentiality within the UN prevents me from speaking about it, but in many countries, we've been forced to make compromises because of bad politicians or bad policies or bad politics. So that's the part of my work I find the most sort of controversial, right? In the sense, or most difficult also in a way. Most controversial in the sense that where is compromise and where is selling your soul, right? There's a thin line. Right. So you have to be always careful saying, okay, I compromise on X because, if I don't do that, I don't reach this million people. Right. But then at what point have you compromised so much that you've sort of given up the fundamental principles of what you do? Right. So I think it's a very thin line. It's very controversial, at least in our own heads. And all of us who've done the kind of work that I do, we've struggled a lot with that. Like having worked in countries like North Korea or Yemen or Zimbabwe during the hyperinflation, yeah, you really feel it, or Sudan and Darfur for that matter, right? Okay, what are the other questions?
Mac, Matthew, if it is okay, I'm going to be on the line, but I have to step out for my PCR test. As Mac said, we are going to Zimbabwe tomorrow. So if it is okay, I'll just be excuse me. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mac.
Very nice, very nice.
Bye, everyone. Nice meeting all of you. Good luck.
Thanks. Hi, guys. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. What do you think it will be the biggest challenge that our generation will face in this journey to try change the climate changes scenario? Like, what do you think it will be the most hard thing to do and to make like your generation and the oldest ones to understand how important is our journey and things that we say? Because sometimes I just feel I'm screaming like, oh, we have a problem here, and no one's listening, because you just look for, like, I live in Brazil and the government, it looks they do not care about this. And I believe that probably all of you already seen something about Amazonian and everything is going on here. And it's kind of a mess. It's so crazy. Look, for all of the situation, I feel that you have no control of all of these things. And it's just so, it make me kind of disappointed with like everything I try to do, all the projects I'm involved in, and I just look and I feel, oh, it doesn't matter because nothing is going on. I mean, I know I have like, I'm doing something, everything I can, but I still feel like that. So what do you think it will be the biggest challenge?
Good question, because you also live in Brazil, which is a bit more of a difficult context than many other, I mean, if you're in Austria or even India for that matter, it's a bit easier. Brazil has a unique set of circumstances right now, which hopefully will change in the next 6 months. I don't know,
So
but
also,
yeah, Brazil is particularly unique for two reasons. I think one is that, and I always say this to a lot of my colleagues and friends, that Brazil has a global responsibility because you're the lungs of the earth. Right? The Brazilian forest is not Brazilian. It belongs to the world because the world needs it to survive. Right? So that makes Brazil a lot more complex. Yes, it's a sovereign country. It has control over its borders, but the resource that you have affects all of us. Right? So I think Brazil has a greater responsibility than most countries because you're like sort of the lungs of the earth, a bit like Indonesia or Congo DRC, right? The other set of Brazil is the unique set of current circumstances. No, I'm trying to be diplomatic here and not say anything, but the unique set of current circumstances also makes it very, very difficult to act on it, right? And you're unfortunately caught between two relatively large issues in Brazil, right? But having said that, I think, as I said before, no, I think I believe in the power of groups, power of organization, and I think your generation is much more connected, linked on Instagram, whatever. So I think you significantly underestimate the power of you all being able to group and being able to have much greater power as a group than as an individual, right? So I think you need to use the current modern technology to be able to create groups, to find like-minded people across Brazil, figure out how you can organize, how you can get together, what can you do, right? And I think there's enough online channels in Brazil that would allow you to sort of do that, right? And then your power gets multiplied, because when it's 1 + 1 person, then they have the power of 3 people. If it's 100 + 100, you have the power of 400 people, right? So I think the ability to use current technology to organize yourself, become bigger groups of like-minded people, I think will give you a much bigger voice than you sort of trying to do it by yourself, right? And I think in Brazil, there are wonderful movements, grassroots movements that do a very good job. So it's also a question of finding the right one that appeals to you, that's passionate, that's close to you, fits your school schedule, et cetera, right? So I think, yeah, but you will, I mean, like I said, the context will change, right? For two things. I think the current set of circumstances hopefully will change in about 6 months for the better. And then the other is the world will start paying more attention to Brazil because we need Brazil, right? So I think a combination of both will give you a lot more sort of healthier environment to make a difference. But I don't have the answers. All I can say is like, don't give up.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Matthew?
Yeah, let's see. If anyone else does have any questions they'd like to direct to Mr. Mack, now would be a great time to do so. Just jump on the mic if you're feeling comfortable, or drop a message in the chat. But in the meantime, maybe were you able to find any of those photos or videos from your work?
Shit. I wish I could. No, there were even some online, but no, sorry. My Surface Pro will freeze if I try to do 2 things at the same time. So I'm not gonna risk it per se, but
Sure.
If you'd given me a bit of heads up, I could have put something.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. I should have thought about it, because obviously people like pictures over over talks. No, so yeah, no, I have like a ton of them, but just not in this hard drive. Because for the last 2.5 years, I haven't been able to move much, right? So this is sort of my first proper long trip in 2.5 years. So, by that time I've changed my computer, and yeah, I don't, yeah, actually we put some stuff together. Let's see if I have this now. Okay. Sorry, I wish I had a bit more. Yeah, I was a bit more prepared for it, Matthew.
Yeah,
But
no worries, no worries.
no, yeah. Just when I tried to search.
Maybe, but would any
Yeah.
chance does Mr. Gopi have access to some of that?
Oh, good question. I can ask him. But Gopi left for this RT-PCR test just now. So.
Oh, gotcha. Okay,
Yeah. I got mine done like a couple hours ago. So.
gotcha.
Yeah. No, I can't see. Oh, shoot, I can't see anything on this hard drive.
Okay, no worries then.
Yeah. No. Nope.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's totally fine. I guess maybe some of us would be interested. Well, I know I am to hear about your days doing like coordination work for the WFP, like really on the ground, interacting with locals and trying to get them the help they need. If you've got any interesting stories from that time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm glad you asked me that, because when the tsunami happened in 2004, right? I went to Sri Lanka the day after the tsunami, and I was given in charge of coordinating food assistance for about 800,000 people that had lost their homes and gotten displaced and stuff. When I landed there and I was given the sort of work, it seemed like a daunting task. I was like, the country is damaged and literally tens of thousands have died, and you're trying to do this, no? But the beauty of humanity really comes out in its worst moments, right? The number of people who came out to help us do it, and there's a famous saying, many hands make light work. The number of people that came out to help us to do it was just incredible, right? Even today, thinking about it makes me emotional, right? The Tamil rebels stopped fighting, the government stopped fighting, like we were able to get access to all the areas. We didn't have to like stop at checkpoints. The entire Sri Lankan cricket team came to help me. Right, like we basically, like people, like all the companies donated their trucks. We literally like got a ship offloaded in the port in less than 24 hours with 4,500 tons of food, because like everybody sort of like all the paperwork was like waived, and like we could, like all the hygiene, sanitation checks and all that stuff were like quick. The Sri Lankan Railway gave me like three freight trains that I could use as like moving warehouses. The British called me in the middle of like what, say 6th or 7th day of the tsunami. The UK Army called and said, "Hey, we have an aircraft carrier for you. Do you need it?" I was like, I don't even know how I would use an aircraft carrier to move food, but thank you very much. So that was interesting. The Americans gave us lots of Mi-6 heavy lift helicopters, so we're able to drop food in places that were cut off because of the ocean. So yeah, like just the humanity came together in a very, very beautiful way. But interestingly, the first 30 days after the tsunami, if I have to put a number to it, everybody came together, like rebels, government, US Army, cricket players, whatever. Everybody came together to help. But then after 30 days, that sort of like humanity sort of coming together started fraying, and everybody sort of went back to their usual like politics and ethnic groups and all that stuff, right? So by month 6, I could see it sort of, unfortunately, going back to the old thing. So, but the very, very positive side of it was like, we literally like, we reached all the 800,000 people we need to reach within 12 days. And I literally had like high school kids who would like finish high school and show up outside our office saying, what can we do? Right. And like businessmen who are like millionaires who would like show up outside our office saying, what we do. Right. So every aspect of this it was very, very touching for me to like be in the middle of all this devastation and that, but see like literally like everybody come out to help. Like it was, Sri Lanka was a really touching experience for us. So that's one, yeah, that's one good part of a very, very bad story of a tsunami, but you really saw humanity at its finest, at its best, where everybody was really like, I had like PhDs who had like fancy jobs, and they came and said, what do you need? I said, like, I need you to go to this village and count the number of people, right? And they sat there like making lists of people with like thumbprints and signatures and stuff, right? Like way overqualified, but they were happy to do whatever. And so like sometimes I would joke to my people that I've never had so many like super highly qualified people doing significantly like labor-based jobs, right? So it was really, yeah, it was the best of humanity at the worst of times. So that was an interesting experience. North Korea, I have a lot of very good stories, but I don't know what I can really share in that sense. No, North Korea would be too controversial. I couldn't really share. Yeah, I mean, Sudan. No, I mean, Philippines was an interesting one. Yeah, we did, again, where you sort of see like, it's almost sounds surreal. Like we were in the South, there was like fighting between the Muslim rebels and the government of Philippines, and there were about 10,000 people who were displaced and needed help urgently. And everybody was going crazy, what to do. I thought, what the heck, let me just go talk to the general who runs the army campaign and the rebel leader who runs. I said, like, hey, I need a 4-hour ceasefire to reach these 10,000 people. And everybody thought I was really crazy to ask them. Like, two people were like viciously shelling and killing each other, right? And they both said, okay. Like, I had 4 hours, like we worked all night to like pack all the food, like got on a convoy, delivered it. And literally as we were driving out, they started shelling each other. So it's like, so sometimes like, yeah, miracles do happen even when like the hope is really bleak, right? So yeah, we have to try. We always have to try. We can never give up. So that was sort of I was like taking a wild chance, and it worked for those 10,000 people who are starving. So yeah, no, I think yeah. So I have lots and lots of these sorts of stories that give me a lot of hope in humanity at some very basic level, right? I think, yeah. And I was brought up by my dad to like sort of believe that everybody is good until you're proved wrong, right? So everybody has a lot of goodness in them. It's up to us to sort of be able to find it. So, and thanks to my job for 21 years, the UN, I've found lots and lots of goodness in some of the most difficult places. So, been very lucky in that sense. And then also a lot of, yeah, lots of funny side of the story also. But yeah, great, Matthew. I need to run to another meeting.
For sure,
but,
for sure. Yeah, now would be a good time to close out for sure. Yeah.
Sorry?
Oh, just saying now would be a good time to close out today's session.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much for being here with us. I think that story you shared about Sri Lanka, maybe it's a metaphor for how we'll respond to the climate crisis. At some point in time, hopefully we'll get our act together and overcome that. But yeah, thank you so much for being here. It was very insightful. I think all of us appreciated it. And real quick before we go, we'd just like to get a screenshot. So for our participants, if you guys feel comfortable to turn on your camera, we're just going to take a quick screenshot and then we can close this out. Okay. All right. 3, 2, 1, smile. Oh, we'll wait for a couple more people. Okay, if you want to turn on your camera, now would be a good time to do so. All right, 3, 2, 1, smile. Awesome. Okay, thank you so much. All right. Yeah. Sorry. Any closing remarks, and then you can go ahead and bow.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for the questions. Yeah, you guys inspire what we do. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And with that, thank you for coming to our second session of our Best Buddies Equality Expo. Do feel free to check out any of our other sessions and sign up through the website link. And yeah, thank you so much. Have a good day, y'all. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.